Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Press, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And now I'm anxious to resume our reading and discussion of the book Footprints of the Jesuits by R.W. Thompson. We're dealing with the Constitution of the Jesuits, and R.W. Thompson relates to us through historians Bartoli, a Jesuit, and Niccolini, an Italian historian, about the terms of the condition of the Constitution of the Jesuits and how the Jesuit order was formed and how each and every Jesuit is broken of all humanity in order to better serve his Jesuit general, like an empty shell, like a cadaver, like a candle whose flame has been blown out, and who now may freely serve the Jesuit general and do whatever he says without fear of committing sin. It also shows us how the Jesuit general in the Constitution is elevated to the status of God Almighty, and that what he instructs his Jesuits to do that might otherwise be regarded as sin, even murder, genocide, religicide, regicide, every other kind of atrocity that is generally considered sinful in the Christian world, is not a sin, but a meritorious work if it is ordered by the Jesuit general, the God of the Jesuits. Now, R.W. Thompson continues. He says, "Here we have information from two sources with reference to Jesuit doctrine upon a point of the very chiefest importance. Niccolini was a native Italian and resided at Rome, where he undoubtedly had access to the best and most reliable sources of information. Bartoli, the other historian we're dealing with, Niccolini and Bartoli was a Jesuit, and must have been familiar with the principles and teachings of the society, or he would not have been trusted and patronized by it as the biographer of Loyola. So these are the most trusted sources for examination of the Jesuits and the Constitution and the formation of the order and of Ignatius Loyola himself. It says they do not disagree materially with regard to the general principle which forbids sin in an abstract form and upon individual responsibility, but justifies its commission when ordered by the general of the Jesuits. It is therefore obviously deducible from this general principle, as stated by both of them, that when the general shall require the perpetration of any crime, or the violation of any obligation, or any oath, or any constitution or law, or the performance of any act howsoever perfidious or shameless, in all, or in any of these cases, the Jesuit shall execute his commands without, quote, fear of offense, unquote. In other words, no fear of sin. No fear of sin. They may commit any crime, no matter how atrocious, if commanded by the Jesuit general. There is literally no law, no constitution, not even the laws of the Roman Catholic Church, not even God's holy law, that will stand in the way of a Jesuit when he is commanded by his Jesuit general to commit a crime. Now, one has to stretch one's comprehension to the limits to be able to understand just how immune the Jesuits regard themselves regarding any law. And they will commit and have committed throughout all their history the most atrocious crimes in world history. And they do it, what they say, is for the greater glory of God. They will not allow any authority on the earth to stand in their way. And their goal is to destroy the Protestant Reformation and virtually make every man, woman, and child on the planet as mindless and as irresponsible as they are, except to the man that the Jesuits are attempting to bring to world domination. Okay? Their very purpose, the very purpose for their existence, is to bring the world to bend the knee to a man on the earth in a global government, a global religion, and a global economic system, and a global socialism. That's the purpose of the Jesuits, or they cease to be Jesuits. And this is the New World Order. When you heard George H.W. Bush speak about a New World Order, this is what he was talking about. Now he says the Jesuit general, is thus placed above all governments, all constitutions and laws, and even above God himself, says R.W. Thompson. There are no laws of state, no rules of morality established by society, no principles of religious faith established by any church, including even the Roman Catholic Church itself, that the Jesuit is not bound to resist when commanded by his general to do so, no matter if it shall lead to war, revolution, or bloodshed, or to the upheaval of society from its very foundations. I hope my listeners are comprehending what we're talking about. Does not the Bible say, make reference to wars, and rumors of wars? All the wars of the world are fomented by the Jesuit general. And if you think that's a stretch, I suggest you do a little research on your own about the Jesuit order and about history. Or just simply continue to listen to Inquisition Update. I'll prove these charges. I will prove these charges in ways that cannot be refuted. Now it says everything is centered in the good of the society, and to that all else must defer. Okay? The Jesuits do whatever is necessary to benefit their society. They will trample underfoot every authority on the earth for the benefit of the Jesuit general, for the benefit of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order. And it says, no wonder that the Jesuit casuists have found in this provision of their Constitution the source of that odious and demoralizing maxim that the means are justified by the ends. In other words, if in the judgment of the Jesuit general, the end is considered right, that is, a global government, however criminal or sinful, it becomes sanctified and may be accomplished without the fear of offense. So no matter whatever means the Jesuit general decides to use to accomplish their desired end, a global government, it is not sin. If the Jesuit general ever, in the future, as he has in the past, decided that the use of widespread nuclear weapons is necessary to achieve the desired end of the Jesuits, that is, a global government, the Jesuit general and all the Jesuits consider it not a sin to deploy a global nuclear war. It says, nor is this all. After, as Niccolini says, quote, having thus transferred the allegiance of the Jesuit from his God to his general, the Constitution proceeds to secure that allegiance from all conflict with the natural affections or worldly interests, unquote. This is again another reference to the training of every Jesuit. He is to have no other affection in this life but to serve the Jesuit general. No affection for family, no affection for friends, no affection for countries or any other division of the heart. He is to serve the Jesuit general as he were simply another extension of the Jesuit general's mind. He says it does not allow anything, any affection of the heart or earthly interest of any kind or nature whatsoever to intervene between the Jesuit and his superior. If he has family ties, he must break them. If friends, he must discard them. If property, he must surrender it to the superior and take the vow of absolute and extreme poverty. He must, in fact, render himself insensible to every sentiment or emotion or feeling that could, by possibility, exist from instinct or habits of thought in his own mind. As it regards property, the Constitution of the Jesuits provides that, quote, he will accomplish a work of great perfection if he dispose of it, that is, his property, in benefit of the society. In other words, whatever property, no matter how wealthy the Jesuit trainee might be, he distinguishes himself, he reaches a greater perfection if he surrenders all of his belongings to the Jesuit general, to the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order. And continuing this subject with reference to paternal affections, it continues, quote, and that his better example may shine before men, he must put away all strong affection for his parents and refrain from the unsuitable desire, and to refrain from an unsuitable desire for a bountiful distribution arising from such disadvantageous affection. In other words, his inheritance. He must not have any affection for whatever inheritance that he might see by maintaining a close relationship with his family. Everything belongs to the Jesuit general. And he says he could not communicate with any person by letter without its inspection by the superior, who shall read all letters addressed to him before their delivery, of course permitting only such to be sent by or to reach him as shall be approved. In other words, the Jesuit general filters all communication to and from every Jesuit. The Jesuits monitor one another to make sure that they have no other affection on this earth but to their general, to their God, the Jesuit general. And it says, quote, he shall not leave the house, and we're talking about the novitiate where they are trained, where the Jesuits live during their training. He shall not leave the house except at such times in which such companions as the superior shall allow. In other words, he can't leave the house unless there are at least 2 other Jesuits with him, so that they may monitor his thoughts, his actions, and his deeds. And he says he may not even move within the house, and he shall not converse without restraint with anyone at his own pleasure, but with such only as shall be approved by the superior. So even within the house, he's under the same restraints. Within the Jesuit novitiate, the school where they are trained, he's under the same restrictions. And it says, he shall not be allowed to go out of the house unless accompanied by 2 of the brethren as spies upon his conduct, and the neglect of either to report faithfully what the others have done and said is held to be sinful. Okay? So they report anything that the novitiate, the novice Jesuit, might do that would violate the constitution of the Jesuits. They're under strict observation and strict and rigorous training. And every thought, word, and deed is monitored and recorded and studied. You talk about profiling, the word doesn't even describe the kind of control that the Jesuits place on upcoming upstart Jesuits in their novitiate training. And it says that to make sure that all the members reflect only the opinions dictated by him, the Jesuit general, they are bound to absolute uniformity as follows. Quote, now these are words taken from the Constitution of the Jesuits. This is all in writing. It says, let all think, let all speak, as far as possible, the same thing according to the apostle. That is the Jesuit general. And it says, let no contradictory doctrines therefore be allowed, either by word of mouth or public sermons or in written books, which last shall not be published without the approbation and consent of the Jesuit general. And indeed, all differences of opinion regarding practical matters shall be avoided. In other words, there can be no contention on non-essential matters. They hold discussions to an absolute minimum, and they're not allowed to differ in opinions with one another on any subject. So they keep controversy completely out of the Jesuits. You know, this enables them more perfectly to focus on what their mission is in the world, and not to get tangled up in quote-unquote doubtful disputations among one another, so as to maintain harmony and unity and a concentrated effort to focus on the mission of the Jesuits. And it says, commenting upon these things, Niccolini most appropriately says, quote, thus no one but the general can exercise the right of uttering a single original thought or opinion. It is almost impossible to conceive the power, especially in former times, of a general having at his absolute disposal such an amount of intelligences, wills, and energies. Unquote. So when all of these Jesuits are reduced to nothing and then reformed to serve no one on the earth but the Jesuit general has surrounding himself an army, a vast army, who will instantaneously respond to any command, no matter how sinful. And they all do it in the name of Christ. Again, making Christ the minister of unrighteousness. This is the spirit of Antichrist on steroids, folks. Okay? Enemy number one in the world is the Jesuit order. And I dare say there isn't maybe a few percentage points of the population of the United States have even an idea what the Jesuits are. They've maintained a low profile. They've squelched their history and any knowledge of them in this country, and at the same time they walk through the most powerful halls of government in the United States of America. And it just literally cannot be explained how this is so. R.W. Thompson continues, he says, if there were any evidences to prove that the Jesuits, as a society, have abandoned any of the principles or policy which bear the stamp of Ignatius Loyola's approval, there would be no necessity other than that which incites to historic investigation for a careful and critical investigation of them. But there are none. On the contrary, it will be seen that from their very nature, they are not susceptible of change so long as the society shall exist. The memory of Ignatius Loyola is still preserved with intense devotion. He is worshipped as a saint, and the words uttered by him are as much reverenced as spoken by the Savior. It seems impossible, therefore, to escape the conviction that this extraordinary society is unlike any other now existing, or which has heretofore existed in the world. That it was conceived by the active brain of an ambitious and worldly-minded enthusiast who had been disappointed at not winning the military distinction he had expected is an irresistible inference from facts well established in his personal history. His vanity and His vanity and imperiousness suggested the starting point of his organization, whereby man was treated as incapable of intelligent reflection, fit only to become the unresisting tool of those who venture profanely to affirm, contrary to any divine revelation, that God has endowed them alone with authority to subject the world to obedience. Okay? That the only purpose of a man on the earth is to be used as an unresisting tool to help the Jesuit general control the entire world. It says, his vanity and imperiousness suggested the starting point of his organization, whereby man was treated as incapable of intelligent reflection, intelligent thought, fit only to become the unresisting tool of those who venture profanely to affirm, contrary to any divine revelation, that God has endowed them alone with authority to subject the world to obedience. Okay? If you're not on board with the Jesuit order, you're not human. Can you imagine the arrogance? I mean, in most people's minds, it would be impossible to create an order like this, but it exists. And it has existed for 500 years. And it has shaped all of history in those last 500 years. It says his plan of operations was from the beginning a direct censure of all the ancient religious orders, as it was also the methods of the church, as it was also of the methods of the church had adopted after the experience of many centuries. In other words, it was reform of all the monastic orders and of the Roman Catholic Church itself that the Jesuit general was put upon himself as his assignment originally, blaming the Protestant Reformation on the decadence and criminality and sinfulness of the Roman Catholic popes and prelates and cardinals and bishops and all the monastic orders. And in order to help defeat the Protestant Reformation, he was going to reform the Roman Catholic Church from within. Okay, I see we've come up on the break. We'll return to the reading and discussion of Footprints of the Jesuits by R.W. Thompson. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. We'll be right back.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
All right, welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. We're talking about the Jesuit order. It says Ignatius Loyola's plan of operation was, from the beginning, a direct censure of all the ancient religious orders, as it was also of the methods that the Roman Catholic Church had adopted after the experience of many centuries. What R.W. Thompson is referring to here is the methods of control that the Roman Catholic Church used to dominate, to control all the people in the old world order. That Ignatius Loyola intended from the very beginning to reform that method of control, even though it had been developed over many, many centuries since the foundation of the papacy. The very foundation of the papacy. And the papacy always sought to unite the church and the state. And together, they ruled over the people. Now, Ignatius Loyola sees the Protestant Reformation as rebellion or failure of the Roman Catholic Church state system to control the people. So Ignatius Loyola is going to strengthen the bond and control of the Roman Catholic Church, the Holy See, over the governments of the world, and strengthen that union so tightly that no rebellion could take place. This was a method of destroying the Protestant Reformation. It's called the Counter-Reformation. The Jesuit-led Counter-Reformation, as I refer to it. And he was also going to censure or punish all the ancient religious orders, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, the Gregorians, on and on and on. Okay, they were to be the watchdogs for the Roman Catholic Church, and they failed in their mission, and not only that, but they were corrupt. And Ignatius Loyola was literally going to whip the church into shape. After all, he had a global mission, one that he gave to himself to conquer the whole world for the Pope. And so, since the Roman Catholic Church couldn't even govern itself, Ignatius Loyola believed that he was needed to thoroughly reform the entire system of church-state control. Now, he says, when he conceived it, his chief purpose undoubtedly was, as heretofore explained, to make himself and his successors independent of and superior to the Pope and the Church. His contemplated antagonism to both was sufficiently indicated by the fact that his original constitution centered absolute and irresistible power in the hands of the general of his society, and the subsequent introduction of the simulated vow of qualified fidelity to the Pope, which was brought about by a decree of necessity amounting almost to duress, has had no other effect than to tax the strategic ingenuity of more than one general by the invention of subterfuges to evade it. In other words, the concession that was made during the negotiations with the Pope to get the Jesuit order founded as a religious order in the Roman Catholic Church, the concession was that they had to obey the Pope and to go wherever in the world the Pope instructed them to go. That was an afterthought. It was never the intention of Ignatius Loyola to give the Pope any say whatsoever in the Jesuit order. And it says, in furtherance of this idea, the society holds no intercourse with the Pope, nor he with it. Its members, the Jesuits individually, are all independent of him, that is, the Pope. Okay? This is unique in all the Catholic world. The Jesuits never answer to the Pope. They answer only to the Jesuit general. And if there's any interaction between the Jesuits and the papacy, it's the general, and only the general, that speaks to the Pope. And when the Pope wants to address the Jesuits, he must address the Jesuit general and may not address any individual Jesuit. Now it says the Jesuit members are all independent of the Pope. They are the creatures and instruments of the general alone. They obey him and no other. If he, as the head of the society, does not think proper to execute the orders of the Pope, as has often occurred in history, the question is alone between the Pope and him, the Jesuit general, not with the society. The only point of unity is between the Jesuit general and the members, and of this the society boasts with its habitual vanity. In enumerating the methods by which this duration is considered assured, Bartoli says, quote, "The chief is a strict union between the members and the head, consequent upon entire dependence, which results from perfect obedience. Ignatius established a monarchical form of government in the society and placed the whole administration of the order in the hands of the Jesuit general, with an authority absolute and independent of all men, with the sole exception of the sovereign pontiff. The general then decided absolutely, both in the choice of the superiors as well as in everything which concerns the members of the company," unquote. So the Jesuit general is all in all to the Jesuits. They don't take orders from anybody but the Jesuit general. This order runs completely independent of the papacy. If the Jesuit general in conference with the Pope agrees with what the Pope says, then all is well and good. But if the Jesuit general disapproves of what the Pope instructs, the Jesuit general commands his Jesuits to obey him and not the Pope. Now this sufficiently shows that the Pope deals alone with the general and he alone with the society, except through the latter. The former cannot reach the members or communicate his will to them, and even when the Pope communicates with the general, the whole obligation of the latter's obedience consists in sending the members of the society to whatever part of the world the Pope shall direct without remuneration. And it is by these means that the society constitutes what Bartoli calls, quote, "one solid and durable whole," unquote, nominally with two heads, but practically paying obedience to but one, the Jesuit general. In other words, the commitment to go wherever the Pope wants to send them in the world without remuneration is just a formality. It doesn't carry much weight. It was just an expedient concession that Ignatius Loyola made just to get his order accepted as a monastic order within the Roman Catholic Church. It was a necessary concession, and if you look at it closely, it had no substance whatsoever. It was just a platitude, in other words. So you can think of the Jesuit order as completely independent of any church authority. They are a sovereign, independent militia. Their jurisdiction is the entire world. They are bound by no law but the law of the Jesuit general. Okay. You talk about a loose cannon, they are. They don't answer to anybody. Not the Pope and not even God himself. Now, it was scarcely necessary to say that the society existed under, quote, a monarchical form of government, unquote. You know, if they created a monarchical form of government for the Jesuits, don't you think they would prefer a monarchical form of government for the whole world? When they openly admit that world conquest is their aim? That's what they want, a monarchical world government, a global government under the volition of a single man, a God upon the earth. This is Antichrist. It says it was scarcely necessary to say that the society existed under a monarchical form of government, for it is impossible for such an organization to exist in any other form. In fact, it surpasses in that respect any institution ever known, not excepting the most tyrannical despotisms by which the Oriental peoples were held in bondage for centuries. Until the time of Ignatius Loyola, no man ever conceived, or if he did, the avowal of it is unknown to history, the idea that the plain and simple teachings of Jesus Christ, which are easily interpreted, could be distorted into an apology for reducing mankind to a multitude of unthinking corpses or dead bodies without thoughts, opinions, or motives of their own, so that they should submit implicitly to the dictation of a single man who, to prepare them for perfect obedience, required that the best affections of their hearts should be extinguished, and nothing generous or kindly or noble be permitted to exist in them. I want my listeners to understand the qualities that the Jesuit general sees as beneficial in every Jesuit is the same qualities that he would impose upon every man, woman, and child on the planet. And you know, I in conversation, general conversation, when talking to people, virtually everybody acknowledges that the world just isn't as friendly as it used to be. Neighbors don't hardly know one another's names. Families have been torn apart. There's no the family bond has been broken. Do you see the process that is taking place? That Ignatius Loyola really is accomplishing on a global scale what he did in fact accomplish within his own order, and to dictate to us every thought, word, and deed. Is that not what they accomplished through the mainstream media? Many people are coming to the realization that the mainstream media is malarkey, and yet everybody repeats what it says. No one, generally speaking, people do not think independently anymore. They're spoon-fed every piece of information they get. We're seeing on a global scale what Ignatius Loyola started to perfect his Jesuit order. And the whole world is to be just a mirror image of that Jesuit order. When Ignatius Loyola completely accomplishes his global aims, we'll all have the same qualities that he expected of his Jesuits. He says absolutism could not possibly be carried further, for there is no degree of humiliation lower than that the Jesuit is required to reach. Humiliation, being completely stripped of any idea of humanity, and fitted for one purpose and one purpose alone, and that is to serve a man, one man, the Jesuit general. That's humiliation. I mean, these Jesuit priests in the world are looked up to as wise sages. Governments of the world look up to these Jesuit priests for leadership, but they're empty shells. They're literally doing what they are instructed to do, all for the greater glory of God, a global government. It says, howsoever cultivated in art, or learned in letters, or courtly in manners, or fascinating in oratory he may become, his conscience is dwarfed into cowardice, and he has parted with his manhood as if it were an old garment to be cast aside at pleasure. No picture of him could be more true than that drawn by the friendly pen of Bartoli, who tells us boastingly that, quote, the society requires no members who are governed by human respect, unquote. In other words, you cannot be fit to become a Jesuit if you have any natural human affection. Does that communicate just how thoroughly a Jesuit is destroyed as a man in order to serve the Jesuit general? He said it requires, according to this biographer of Loyola, Bartoli, only those who hold in utter contempt the opinions of the world, those who extinguish in their minds all sense of either praise or shame, and who close all avenues by which men's hearts are reached by noble or generous or patriotic impulses. They seem to think that God, after making man in his own image, and with capacity of inspiring thoughts, paralyzed his best affections in mere sport and left him only fitted for blind obedience to an imperious master, who requires him to sunder all the tenderest domestic relations as if they invited to impiety, and who treats all the highest social virtues as vices when they do not advance his ambitious ends, and any form of vice is virtue when it does. That's pretty well sums up what the Jesuit order is all about. And it's going to take a while for my listeners who have never known anything about the Jesuits to comprehend what we're literally talking about. It takes a while. It's so contrary to human nature to conceive the depravity of a Jesuit, completely devoid of any personality, and simply an empty shell into which the Jesuit general can pour his venom. Now, this is chapter 4 in the book. It's entitled Government of the Society. R.W. Thompson says, any reader of the last 2 chapters can see, without the admission of Bartoli to that effect, that the government of the Society of Jesuits is entirely monarchical and founded upon the paternalism set up by imperial rulers in proof of their divine right to govern. Okay? This is government by divine right, a global monarchy by divine right. They claim God's sanction for what they do in the world. And it says, like these rulers, Loyola maintained that mankind were not competent to govern themselves, and therefore that Providence, capital P, that's a reference to God, has ordained that they can be rightfully and wisely governed only by their superiors, no matter whether they acquire and maintain their superiority by fraud, intrigue, or violence. He had observed society when it was accustomed to pay but little attention, if any, to the structure and details of government, and left all matters of public concern to drift into channels created by those who ruled them with the view of preserving their own power. And hence he imitated their imperial example by making this principle of paternalism the fundamental basis of his society, but transcended the despotism of antiquity by enslaving both the minds and the bodies of its members and annihilating all sense of personality among them. This society, consequently, has never been reconciled to any other form of government than absolute monarchy, nor can it ever be, so long as it shall exist. Without absolutism in its most extreme form, it would lose its power of cohesion and fall to pieces, as inevitably a ship drifts away from its course when the rudder is broken. In other words, the Jesuit order cannot exist as a society without this divine right monarchism as characterized by the Jesuit general, as displayed by the Jesuit general. It says, having become thus familiar with the Constitution and the organization of this society and the principles which underlie them, it is equally important to discover how these were administered by Ignatius Loyola himself and his immediate successors, for otherwise its real character cannot be known. It has a history of its own, created by itself, and in a great measure, when not subject to the inspection of others, and unless we shall become also familiar with this, it will be hard, if not impossible, to understand the fierce and tireless animosity with which it has resisted all who have endeavored to block its way to universal dominion, including even popes and the Church itself. If any other society ever had such a history, it has not been written. When Ignatius Loyola obtained the approval of his society from Pope Paul III, he undoubtedly accomplished a great triumph, greater than any he had previously known. It gave him the opportunity of foreseeing that whatsoever thereafter it should be demanded in his own or the interests of the society, he would have it in his power, with a servile host at his command, to create a factious rivalry to the papacy itself. It may be supposed that the Pope acted with reference to what he regarded as the welfare of the Church and under a due sense of his own responsibility, but Loyola experienced no such feeling. Backed by a mere handful of zealots who were unable to withstand his importunities and from whom he probably concealed his ulterior design, he concentrated all his energies upon the single object of obtaining the centralization of power in his own hands, without troubling himself to inquire at whose expense it might be accomplished, or the means to be employed. The Pope had his own character as the head of the Church to maintain, while Loyola was a mere soldier of fortune, seeking adventure and stimulated by personal ambition to acquire both power and fame by means of an organization which the Pope was not familiar, but which had been constructed in secret so as to make possible any form of disguise or dissimulation necessary to accomplish his desired ends. It would be unfair to assert, in the absence of explicit proof, that the Pope acted otherwise than with reference primarily to the interests of the Church, while at the same time he manifestly did not desire to weaken the papal, that is, his own power. Although he ordered the assembling of what afterwards became the Council of Trent, he was not distinguished as a reforming pope, inasmuch as he was understood to have been constrained to this act to counteract the imperial policy of Charles V, who had threatened a national council in his own dominions. Yet it is possible that some reforms might have been introduced to which he would have given his assent, provided they had not lessened the authority of the papacy. Loyola was not influenced by any of these motives. He attributed the corruption of the clergy and the disturbed condition of the Roman Catholic Church to the imbecility of the popes and their inability to contend successfully against the impending evils. This is a reference to the Protestant Reformation and the rebellion of the kings of the earth against the papacy as a result of the Protestant Reformation. as we say, the Roman Catholic Church was in a period of decline morally, and the people were rebelling against the authority of the church, and so were the governments. And it was Ignatius Loyola's job, his self-appointed design, to whip the Roman Catholic Church into shape, reestablish the union of church and state, destroy the Protestant Reformation, and literally continue on that basis to govern the whole world. And it says, and thus influenced, he evidently hoped to put in operation, through the agency of his new society, the Jesuit order, such instrumentalities as would counteract the existing evils in a manner that would assure the glory of the achievement to himself and his society. He doubtless desired in this way to obtain such fame as would overshadow the papacy itself. Of the contemptuous disregard and defiance of popes who have opposed Jesuit pretensions, we shall hereafter see many and convincing proofs. And we're about to continue on the program tomorrow to learn how the Jesuits have defied the papacy and have shaped the papacy into an image most suitable to the Jesuit general, a global monarch, a ruthless and global monarch demanding ascension and obedience from every human being on the planet. Mission accomplished. We'll be back tomorrow on Inquisition Update. You're listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. We'll see you tomorrow.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.